Welcome back, Honors. All right, welcome back to your first flip after your first very successful day of artwork presentations, right? They were so good. Y'all are doing such a great job so far. Some of y'all are like, you talked a lot during mine. Well, look, some of y'all need help conveying the information, all right? So it's not that you don't know it, you just need help like delivery stuff, right? It's not a big deal. But the big thing about it, though, is we left off in our last flip and in our review discussing the Reformation, right? The greatest thing about the stuff that we're moving into now is that y'all already know so much about the Reformation from your religious classes. Thanks so much to these saints right here. I know. Fantastic people, right? You already know some of this stuff, so we can actually move pretty quickly, right? So the big thing about it that we already know is that there's a lot of different stuff going on, right? We know there's like corruption going on, there's a lot of corrupt acts and stuff, but now we're moving into the Renaissance papacy, right? We're now moving past Cadaver Synod, past Great Western Schism. We're getting into like the reign of Julius II kind of era, the reign of Alexander VI, right? We're getting into all these guys, the late 1400s, that are considered like your Renaissance popes, right? So popes of the Renaissance period are going to lead extremely wealthy lives, right? Very wealthy lives. They support the arts. They hire artists. They are patrons of art themselves, right? For example, Julius II paid for the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Pope Paul III pays for the Last Judgment, right? Pope Julius II pays for the Sistine Madonna, right? Pays for the School of Athens. Does like all these different works, right? It's very important to understand these people. To finance these new projects, though, they are going to cost a lot of money, right? So and since they cost so much money, they decide that they're going to actually create ways to raise some funds, right? So the ways that they start raising funds to complete these artworks and beautify these churches, because they got a little out of order, and it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, hey, Renaissance papacy, maybe you stop buying art if you don't have the money to buy art instead of charging high fees for things like marriages and baptisms. And also instead of selling indulgences, right? So this is something you already know of about in your religion class because you talked about it, I'm sure, quite a bit. But an indulgence, what it is, what was being sold during the Renaissance papacy era, was a lessening of time that your soul would have to spend in purgatory, right? So indulgences were supposed to be good deeds, right? Indulgences were supposed to be these things that are not bought and sold, right? Indulgences do exist in the Bible. It's important to know that indulgences do exist in the Bible, right? The indulgences that exist in the Bible, though, are the ones where it's like, I did a good thing, so this will lessen the time that my soul has to spend in purgatory. I went to this place and said a rosary. That's a plenary indulgence, right? So I will lessen the time that I have to spend in purgatory, right? So, for example, if you go to the Vatican, there's tons of plenary indulgences all over the place in the Vatican, right? There's all these different things you can do. So the thing about it, though, is you're not supposed to buy or sell them, right? Because that inherently creates a very unfair financial situation where poor people cannot just pay off their sins, but rich people can, right? You can't have a system in place where poor people are going to forego meals and save money because they think that it's going to get their soul out of purgatory faster, right? This is ridiculous. You cannot sell indulgences. It flies in the face of how the faith is supposed to function, right? But this guy didn't care. Pope Leo X, right? Pope Leo X, who is a Medici Pope and a very fantastic example of nepotism in the papacy going forward. Pope Leo X of the Medici family, who is very well known for bribing his way into certain church offices, who is a great example of nepotism, is going to serve as kind of the tipping point pope that sends the whole thing into the Reformation, right? Gotta get my coffee. So, the big thing about it, though, where is my coffee? Where'd you go? Oh, there he is. Come here, Henry. All right, so now, so the big thing about it, though, is that Pope Leo X is your big Medici Pope. Also, it's Henry VIII on my mug, hence the come here, Henry. Now, he wants to do something along the lines of fix up St. Peter's. So just so you know what St. Peter's is, St. Peter's Basilica is the church in the Vatican, right? So the St. Peter's Basilica has is home to the Dome of the Vatican, is also home to the entire Vatican complex, and also the Sistine Chapel is right next to it and adjacent to it in Rome. Pope Leo X wants to fix it up. He wants to create a new dome. He wants to build the inside out. He wants to do all these other crazy intense things to the inside of the St. Peter's, but he needs money to do that. So he sends this priest, a man by the name of Johann Tetzel, out into the Holy Roman Empire to sell indulgences, right? Now, the thing about it, though, big part of these indulgences that he's selling are ones that are supposed to be expensive, more expensive than a regular indulgence. Ones that apparently don't just get you out of purgatory sooner, but also get your dead family out of purgatory sooner. You're telling me this guy's selling like Ferrari, Cadillac, Bugatti indulgences? Yeah, I am saying that, Gianna. So smart, Gianna. Gianna, you're killing the game right now. What are we going to do to contain your intelligence, right? Nothing, I think. You're going to be the first female president. It's going to be awesome, right? So exactly right there, Gianna. Good job. These things that he's selling are even more unfair than other indulgences, right? The big thing about it, though, is that these indulgences got you out of hell, not hell, got you out of purgatory sooner, got your family out of purgatory sooner. And he also even used the printing press that was out now to print these pamphlets that went out all around to these poor communities of the Holy Roman Empire, aka Germany. And they had this saying on them, and the saying in German literally said, "When a penny in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs." So literally, in this pamphlet, it says, if you put money in my box, I'll give you an indulgence, and a soul comes out of purgatory. It's in writing. We have a primary source evidence of it. That's his hand right there on top of his coffer, and these are the indulgences right behind his head. Johann Tetzel, not a very good figure, but the thing about it is that pamphlet, that coffer, that penny, that saying is the thing that finally sends this man over the edge, right? This guy named Martin Luther, right? So Martin Luther has decided, I've had enough, I'm done, right? And he decides that he is going to speak out formally against the church, and he's going to get all kinds of fired up, right? So the big thing you need to understand about Martin Luther, though, Martin Luther, by this point, was a younger man, right? He was a young German priest that didn't even actually start out as a priest. His original job was not being a priest, right? Martin Luther's original job was he was a university student, and he was studying law. So he is actually on progression to become a lawyer. But what ended up happening to him is while he was studying to be a lawyer, apparently he was moving from one academic building to the other one in the middle of the night because he was actually studying or doing some kind of academic work or whatever. And he's moving, and he gets caught in a really intense thunderstorm. And apparently Martin Luther, who was a little quirky, little individual, kind of a unique individual in and of himself, gets caught in this thunderstorm, and he is petrified of lightning and thunder. And so the lightning and thunder start blowing up and flashing all around him and stuff like that. And he freaks out, and he drops down to his knees, and he goes, Saint Anne, if you save me from this storm, I will forever be a priest in your holy church, right? And then he just didn't die. He just got wet, and then he was like, hey, look, I have to be a priest now. So he becomes a priest, right? And not just any kind of priest. He becomes a monastery priest and also a doctorate in theology. And he becomes a university professor. And he starts teaching other people about interpretations of the Bible, interpretations of Scripture, and things like that. And as a young man, he sees all these things swirling around him. He sees the Renaissance papacy. He takes a visit to Rome at one point and then comes back and says Rome is only a city for thieves and foxes, right? Saying that it's a dirty, disgusting city with poor thieves and stuff like that, and scapes running around in it and all these other gross people, right? And also everybody knows a fox is a nefarious image because of this guy.
I need your help to stop Swiper. You have to say, Swiper, no swiping. Say it with us. Swiper, no swiping. Swiper, no swiping. Swiper, no swiping.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so Martin Luther had a lot of opinions, Swiper, about a lot of things going on in the church. He starts seeing how the money gets spent. He starts hearing about these indulgences being sold. And when he hears about Johann Tetzel selling those indulgences, he's like, I had all these ideas about the faith before this even happened. He starts kind of going along the ideas. It's like, are we putting too much stock in the popes? Are we putting too much stock in a priest? If God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, shouldn't we just be able to have our faith in that he knows our hearts and souls? And so he had these ideas for a long time, but the issuing of these indulgences by Johann Tetzel and Leo X, the Medici Pope, drive him to write the 95 Theses and apparently, quote unquote, nail into the door of this church, right? Now, just to give you a heads up, we know for more than likely a fact that he probably never did that, all right? Just to give you a heads up, he probably did not actually write, he probably did not actually nail that to the door of a church. It's probably much more related to much more related to university tradition of posting announcements on the church doors and stuff, because most universities were focused around old monasteries in Europe at the time. And so the thing about it is, he more than likely didn't do that. We believe that he actually more than likely jotted this down wrote a letter with his 95 Theses in it, this document right here, to a cardinal or a bishop of the Holy Roman Empire, and just showed his fury and how upset he was, right? And so if you look at this really quick, he's got 95 reasons why he can't stand the church right now. 95 reasons why he's mad at the Pope. 95 reasons why he thinks that the Catholic faith should be changed. And at no point in the 95 Theses is he advocating for creating a new church. At no point. He's not creating anything. He's just showing why he's upset. Because if you look at this, the word indulgence pops up in the 95 Theses 45 different times. Like, look at that. Papal indulgences must be preached with caution. Christians are to be taught that, look at this, number 47. Christians are to be taught that the buying of indulgence is a matter of free choice, not commanded, right? That it is not something that, like, Christ is commanding you to do. Like, he talks about indulgences 45 different times in the 95 Theses. He talks about so many other different things. He also takes jabs at papal authority, right? He talks about the papacy 10 different times. So as you can see, this list is very intense and very groundbreaking. But the thing about it is why did it cause such a kerfuffle? Why did it cause such a mess? Why did it cause such an intensity if all he's really doing is writing and downplaying indulgences? The biggest reason why is because this document, after it gets sent by letter, then starts getting printed and sent all over Europe, right? The thing about it is, though, is in his 95 Theses, he disapproves of indulgences. He criticizes the power of the popes, and he calls the church to a debate. Not for a new church, he calls for a debate. And he's like, we should chat, right? We should talk about these things and really get it going. And just like I said, we think it's probably just a letter. So, but the thing about it is his letter gets printed in pamphlets and starts getting sent all over Europe. And people start finding it and looking at it. They're like, man, this guy's got a lot to say. I think I agree with him on a lot of this stuff. I do think that it's important that we diminish the power of priests inside of these churches. I do think it's important that we stop selling indulgences. I do think that we need to call for change and reform, right? So this thing is like a viral tweet. It just blows up overnight, right? And what ends up happening is he gets into a pamphlet war with the Pope himself. And this is in 1520, right? So 1517, write that down, is the year that he apparently issued the 95 Theses or nailed them to the door of that church. And as they begin to spread and as the ideas begin to spread, leading up from 1518 to 1520, he gets into a pamphlet war with the Pope. The Pope calls him to Rome and says, hey, come down here and we'll chat. And he's like, I'm not going down there. I'm not going to that nasty city. I ain't going down there because if I go down there, you might kill me like you did Jan Hus, right? I'm not doing it. And so the Pope says, how dare you refuse my commands? And he says, you have, and he sends a letter. He sends a letter, and that letter is called a papal bull, right? And in that papal bull, the letter that Martin Luther received, it said, Martin, you've got 6 months to take back everything you've said. You got 6 months to reissue pamphlets that don't have this 95 Theses shenanigans in it, that don't talk bad about the papacy, that don't do all these things. And if you don't do it by December 31st of 1520, then we're going to excommunicate you, right? And then apparently, after the Pope wrote that letter, he had a big bonfire of a bunch of pamphlets that had the 95 Theses in it, right? So he's burning Martin Luther's work. But then Martin Luther gets the papal bull, and in a square in Germany, in Nuremberg, he literally apparently points at it and he says, look at the Pope trying to tell me what to do. Well, I ain't listening to this. And he burns it in front of all these people, right? But the thing about it to notice really quickly are the people standing nearby him, right? If you're looking around at the individual standing in this picture, you'll notice that there's a lot of German priests. You see these little hats they're wearing? Those are German priests. And you're also going to know these people in the background, or notice these people in the background. These people in the background are what's known as German princes, right? So the Holy Roman Empire at this time was ran by a person called the Holy Roman Emperor, right? Well, the Holy Roman Emperor was chosen by 7 different princes of the Holy Roman Empire, right? They're called the electors. And there are big princes and smaller princes, but these princes control territories inside of the Holy Roman Empire, which you would now call Germany, right? But at the time, it's called the Holy Roman Empire. And so these princes start seeing Martin Luther defy the church directly. And they know that this 19-year-old kid, Charles V, is their Holy Roman Emperor. And they're like, if Martin Luther can tell the Pope that he doesn't want to listen to him and burn the papal bull in front of people, maybe if we join with him, we don't have to listen to this Charles V kid anymore, right? So like maybe we can retain more power. Maybe we can use this as a political uprising power, right? So you got all this crazy stuff happening, but Martin Luther burns the papal bull, and then he gets excommunicated by royal papal bull decree in 1521. In January of 1521, Martin Luther is excommunicated, right? And so as a process of this, to try and prevent the political uproar of these princes joining up with Martin Luther, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, who is only 19 years old and somebody you need to highlight because Charles V is going to become very, very important later. Charles V, the Habsburg the Habsburg Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, decides to hold a meeting. And he's like, the Pope has already excommunicated him, so I don't need to worry about his soul. What I have to worry about as the Holy Roman Empire is if this priest, Martin Luther, keeps running around and running his mouth, these princes are going to join with him, and I'm going to lose power and possibly have to fight a war within my own borders, right? So he holds a meeting, and that meeting is called the Diet of Worms, right? Now, in English, you say worms. Nobody in German is going to correct you because they know that you don't know how to say it. But it's actually Worms, all right? So it's a city in Germany, right? So, or Holy Roman Empire, now Germany. And the diet, or a diet, doesn't mean they're eating worms. What it actually means is a meeting. So the Diet of Worms is a meeting in Worms, Germany. And like Luther gets called before Charles V, and he shows up to this meeting, right? Because he's already been excommunicated. What else is going to happen, right? So like, and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who's only 19 years old at the time, tells him to take back everything he said, right? So if I actually like look up a picture of this really quick, do I actually have a picture of it in here? I don't think I do. So if I look up a picture of this really quick, the Diet of Worms. So like if you actually look at this meeting, you will see in this image Charles V, the young Charles V, sitting on his throne right here in front of Martin Luther, right? And Martin Luther shows up to this meeting, and Charles V says, you need to take back all the things you're saying, or I will not excommunicate you, I will issue you as an outlaw in the Holy Roman Empire, and you will be arrested, tried, and possibly put to death. And Charles says this is Charles right there, sitting on his throne. Martin Luther standing right here. And Martin Luther, ooh, God, stop that. I don't need to load this whole thing. Martin Luther says to him, I cannot, in good conscience, take back the things that I have said, because unless I am shown by literal scripture that I am wrong, right? So Martin Luther says, all right, Charles, you want me to stop saying what I'm saying? Whip out a Bible, read it, tell me I'm wrong, right? So funny thing is, Charles can't read the Bible because he doesn't read Latin, right? So another thing that Luther was really upset about, but we'll get to that here in a minute. So Luther refuses to take back his ideas. Luther gets declared an outlaw at that point, and basically all of his writings get condemned. And now this point is where he basically unintentionally starts Lutheranism, right? And his followers start becoming Lutherans, and other reformers start popping up. People that are like, man, I like your ideas, bro. I like them. So Luther goes on the run, and he starts running around, and the princes of the Holy Roman Empire give him shelter. The princes of the Holy Roman Empire start defying Charles V, and they start becoming the first followers of Lutheranism. They give him shelter. There's a very, very famous one named Frederick the Wise, who apparently had a collection of over 300 relics, right? And in a big way, this is the catalyst that starts the Lutheran Church, right? That really begins to lead to what's known as religious plurality, right? Or as in having a bunch of different churches throughout Europe. And while he's in hiding, he starts translating the Bible into vernacular languages, right? He translates the Bible into German, right? So people who are German and can speak German and read German can read the Bible, because it's very important to him. Because at that meeting at the Diet of Worms, he's like, Charles, you find in Scripture where I'm wrong. You tell me where it says that I think that these things are wrong and illegal. You tell me where it says it's okay to sell indulgences, right? Couldn't do it. Because this is the big three guiding ideas of Lutheranism. Grace alone, faith alone, Scripture alone. Now, you learned it in religion as solo fide, solo scriptura, solo gratia, or something like that, right? So, now, the big thing that we need to understand, though, is what these words mean, right? So, grace alone basically just means it is by the grace of God that you will get into heaven, not the actions of man, right? So, it's important to understand this one because it's very, very important, right? Scripture alone, that one's easy. Just means go read the Bible. The words of God are in there. That's how you connect with him. And if you want to read the Bible, you got to be able to have it in vernacular languages, so he advocates for those things, right? The grace alone one, though, is the one that completely and politically goes against the authority of the Catholic Church, right? Because according to the Catholic Church, you've got God right here. Now, this is, of course, the old Catholic Church. The new Catholic Church doesn't really believe this anymore. You've got a priest right here, and then you've got the human right here, or the parishioner, right? And for a human to receive God's grace, that grace must be funneled through a priest into the Eucharist and then to a person where transubstantiation occurs, right? So without a priest, you apparently can't receive God's grace. Luther says that's dumb. You should be able to just talk to God directly. So this is the Luther idea. This is the old Catholic idea, right? So he's basically saying you don't need a priest. You don't need a bishop. You don't need a cardinal. You don't need these things. You can have a relationship with God on your own, right? And that also branches off with his faith alone idea, that God knows your heart, knows your soul, and he will be the determining factor of whether or not you receive salvation, not a priest, right? He said that priests and lay people are of the same equal value, right? Scripture alone is huge. He then also goes off and gets married in 1525, right? In 1525, he gets married to a former nun, right? Luther also opposed the limiting, or approved of limiting the power of priests, allowing priests to marry, a lot of really intense stuff. And Lutheranism becomes the very first Protestant faith. The reason why it's called a Protestant faith is because these German princes are protesting the authority of the Catholic Church of Charles V, and they're becoming a new type of Christian. Hence, Protestant, or to protest, right? There you go, right? And so a big thing, though, that you got to understand is now these next few lines you don't need to write. I'm just using them to explain something. So right here and here, you don't need it. You don't need it. You need this part, though, okay? So now we've been talking about Luther a lot and his revolution against the church. We talked about the creation of the Lutheran faith. We talked about how other reformers are going to start to pop up. But it's not like that fixed everything. And a big key moment to kind of understand right here is that this is much more political than people really like to play out. It's very political. Because after this, wars and violence are going to break out following the start of the Reformation. One of the big, and it's not always Catholics versus Protestant. You would think in your mind, you're like, oh, is it going to be like Catholic troops versus Protestant troops? Not really, because the Keppel Wars, you had a little bit of a weird blurry line. The Schmalkaldic Wars was a big one when the Catholic troops of Charles V fought the Protestant troops of the German princes. That's all fine and good. But the big thing about it, though, is there were even some really big, terrible things that happened inside of predominantly Protestant countries. One of the biggest ones was this thing called the German Peasants' Rebellion, right? So in the 1520s, German peasants have their crops begin to die, right? So German peasants are really upset, and this is a place where they're converting to Lutheranism. Germans are converting to Lutheranism a lot. A lot of them are becoming Protestants. The princes are becoming Protestants. They are citing the writings of Martin Luther, and they're getting really, really into it. But the German peasants start looking around, they're like, why am I paying higher rent if my crops are dying? Why are these princes acting as though they're better than me? Because according to Luther, we're supposed to be on the same playing field because all men are equal before the eyes of God. And so the peasants write up a document with all of their demands in it, right? This document literally says the demands of the German peasants, right? And it literally comes out, and they're citing all of these different ideas, and they're like, we should be equal. You should not be charging me more rent. You should be being compassionate and understand that I'm working for you, but you should also take care of me. And Luther originally supported their ideas, but then the German peasants started raising armies, and they started taking over cities, and they started having a massive rebellion. And then Luther went back on everything he said and said that the German peasants deserved to be run down like dogs in the streets, right? That's insane. That means that Luther supported these people and then flipped on them, right? And then flipped on them completely. And that gave authority to the German princes to send in massive armies and destroy this rebellion. And anywhere from 100,000 to 300,000 peasants died, right? So and were killed by German prince armies. And why did this happen? Because it was still political, right? Because it's still very political, and nobles do not want to give serfs any more rights or money unless they absolutely have to. And so a big thing to understand here is that, yes, it's a new revolution in Christianity is happening, but a lot of this has political tones, right? A lot of this has political overarching themes and stuff like that. And a big one that's going to have a massive political thing going on is when this guy becomes the King of England, and when he takes England to a new Protestant faith as well. And we'll talk about Henry VIII being the defender of the faith in our next flip. Talk to y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.